All right, we're live. Cool. All right, Adam, you want to get us kicked off?
Sure. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to Workshop Wednesday number 2 for May 2018. We're all excited to be here. We move on to we get kicked off here. Next slide. We are all back this week. Myself and Trevor, Isa, and Vignesh. Hopefully, Isa doesn't have any technical problems this week. So,
keeping hope alive. Keep my fingers crossed.
We are going to be tackling typography today. So real quick, kind of anyone new to Workshop Wednesday, welcome to Top Coder Design. We are a global design community focused on solving real-world UI and UX problems through crowdsourcing. As a top coder designer, you have an opportunity to compete in all types of design challenges focused on user experience, customer experience, user interface design, with an opportunity to win prize money, sharpen your skills, and learn latest technologies while working on real design problems for real customers. And we do have some pretty big name customers at Top Coder. So we, at Top Coder Design, this is a challenge-based process where you submit your design concept or solution for critique and feedback by the team that you're looking at here, and of course, our customers. Through this process, we promote design education, open design thinking, and innovation through rapid design. It's all about challenging ourselves, what we all think about when we think about the design process, and the way we work together as a design community. We always like to say you have many opportunities here within our community to specialize, focusing in on information architecture, design, UI, UX, as I said, and also prototyping. Welcome to our community, and looking forward to this week's Workshop Wednesday. Top level key things that we like to focus in on at Top Coder Design is information architecture, UI design, and prototyping, the things that we plan and design. So information architecture is our wireframing challenge track. We leverage wireframes to inform customers about the different ways to solve the problem they're looking to get done. And wireframing within the Top Coder community is leveraging tools like Axure to create black and white data flows, and understanding what the potential experience is before we actually get into user interface design. UI design is our design track focused on user experience and customer experience, and of course, user interface design. We leverage this the most around design concepts, mobile application design, responsive design, all focused on kind of what the digital output needs to be for our customer requests. We talk a lot about design concepts and production design. If you refer back to Workshop Wednesday from last week, you can learn more about what design concepts and production design is at Top Coder Design. The majority of our design challenges focus on high fidelity outcomes, leveraging tools like Photoshop, Adobe Experience Design, and Sketch. UI prototyping is our front-end development track focused on converting a designer's vision into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, either creating a demo that a customer can take on the road and showcase their idea, or actually creating the fully functioning front-end code that will be leveraged for building out an application. So if anybody's interested in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and converting over design, this is a great track and a challenge process for you. As I mentioned, it's mostly focused on what we call UI demos and, of course, the front-end code creation. Welcome, everyone, to Workshop Wednesday.
Okay, so I'm going to briefly discuss, we're going to basically go into a typography 101 workshop. This part of the Workshop Wednesday. So typography. When you look at a lot of user interfaces, graphic design layouts, the two main things that really stand out are typography and color. So being that typography is such a big part of design, we thought it was a good idea to cover typography today. So some of the terminology that I'll be using, vocabulary terms, just to kind of get you guys familiar with what we're going to be talking about. To start off, we'll talk about a little bit about tracking, what you see up top. That covers the overall spacing between groups of letters. Then you have kerning underneath, which deals with spacing between pairs of letters. You have what's called X height on the left side, which is the height of lowercase letters in a typeface. And X height gets its name because it's the height of the lowercase x in that particular typeface. Then you have ascenders, which is the letters that are above the, that extend above the X height. And you have descenders, which are, which are parts of the letters that extend below the imaginary baseline, which is that imaginary line that the letters kind of rests upon. And lastly, beneath you have what's called serifs. And if you look at like the little purple circles, those are highlighted by the little extenders that are at the bottom of those P's in typography. So let's get into a little bit more. So serifs. So I'm sure everyone's heard about, serifs, the two main styles, serifs, sans serifs. So serifs are like I mentioned, the little extenders that you see at the bottoms and tops of letters. Serif types generally have a little bit more detail than sans serifs. If you also look at the bottom, they also call serifs footers. When you see them at the bottom of letters, like for example on the R, the I, and the Fs. So that's one of the differences between serifs and sans serifs. Shown as an example, you can see some examples of some serif typefaces. This is just a small sample size. You can literally find thousands of serif typefaces. As a designer, you should be able to kind of go through different typefaces to communicate whatever it is idea that you're trying to communicate. So there really isn't a science or math or formula to selecting a serif. It's just trying to find the right one that flows with your particular design. So then we go into sans serifs. So as you can see here, sans serifs are a little bit different from serif typefaces. Sans serifs, if you can see, doesn't have those little extenders or projections. They have a much more cleaner look to serifs. So that's the main differences between serifs and sans serif typefaces. Here's some examples of some sans serif typefaces. Also, like I mentioned, there's literally thousands of sans serif typefaces to choose from. Again, there isn't really a science to choosing them. It's just a matter of just trying to find the one that works or complements your design the best. So yeah, just, sometimes it's best to maybe have like 6 or 7 in your toolbox, your go-tos that you want to think about when you're doing your design work. Okay, so now we'll go into display type. Display type is basically typefaces that were designed to be shown in big and bold, and provide emphasis to a design. So if you notice in these examples, like in Bloomberg Newsweek to the left, this is "try this" is big and bold. In this Nike poster, you see "there is no finish line." That's really big and bold. It's meant to grab your attention. And then the fly to the left, the ceramics gallery that was happening. You can see that title and the artist is shown in big and bold. So it's meant to be shown really big and bold to show emphasis. Generally, display types is any type that's 14 point or larger. Just to backtrack, when you think about points is a measurement. When you talk about type size measurements, it goes like, let's say 72 points is equal to an inch. So when you're talking about like 14 points, that would be 14 70-seconds of an inch. So that's kind of like how type sizes are measured. Okay, so here are some examples of what might be some display types. So again, as you notice, a lot of these typefaces that I use for these are bolds. You see bolds. You see some handwritten font types. You see a script font type where it says half human, half fish, found in Florida. So again, display types are meant to be seen in small quantities and supposed to be used for emphasis and effect. So titles, headlines, you would want to use display types for those types of situations. Okay, so we just talked about the display types. Text types would be the opposite of display types. So those are typefaces that were meant to be shown in large quantities, but the font sizes are a lot smaller. So the font size for text type is 10 to 12 points. You'll see text types generally in newspapers, in newspaper articles, magazines, books. It's meant to be for you. These types of typefaces are meant to be used for easy reading, legibility of letters. There's a lot of, I guess you can say, debate or tests dealing with which are the best typefaces that's for text type. Many people lean towards serif typefaces, and the belief is that serif typefaces with the details, with all the detailing that's involved, allows for easy readability and differentiation between letters. Also, it's mentioned that like those horizontal extenders allow the eye to move across letters much more easily and provide readability. But then there's also debates on the serif side, on the sans serif side, where they kind of say the opposite. So people believe that sans serifs might be a little bit easier to read because of the cleaner look. So again, when you're choosing text types, think about the reader. It's going to be something that's going to be generally smaller. So think about the comfortability for the reader to read large amounts of text. So you want to use something that's really clean and something that's really easy to read when you're selecting text types. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more technical. So when we think about kerning, like I mentioned before, kerning is the spacing in between pairs of letters. So in these examples, so let me just backtrack a little bit again. So what happens is when a designer designs a typeface, they design what's called kerning pairs. And what that is they design for every possible combination of the spacing between every combination of pairs of letters. But when they do those designs, it's designed at text type size. What happens is that when you increase the size of a font or of a typeface, the spacing, not only does the letters increase, but also the spacing in between the letters increase. And if you've ever noticed that when you enlarge the font size, you kind of have like these little weird gaps in between letters. A way to correct that is by adjusting the kerning on it. So in these examples, these are some examples of some common pairs that you usually give problems with spacing when you increase the size. Again, to like the untrained eye, it doesn't look too bad, like the spacing between the VA and the FO and the TA, but you can make it a little bit better by decreasing that little bit of space to kind of like give the letters and characters a little bit of a better look. If you look into this example, a short sentence, LeVar saw a UFO. If you look at the example on the top, again, in between the A and the V in LeVar, the A and the W in saw, the F and the O in UFO, again, it may not be noticeable to most people, but as a designer, you should be able to see that. And there are some cases where you might have people or you might have clients who might see something and they may not necessarily know what's wrong with something. they can't necessarily put their finger on it, but as a designer, you should be able to look at something and see that, oh, maybe I can do some adjusting on the kerning, and I can make this look a little bit better. So if you look at the example on the bottom, just below it, you see that it flows a little bit better by adjusting the kerning between those letters, kind of giving you a little bit of a better look on the sentences. Okay, so we'll talk about tracking. So if kerning is the spacing in between pairs of letters, tracking is the equally adjusted space between groups of letters or lines of text. So again, this is an example. With tracking, you wouldn't necessarily adjust between pairs. You would adjust in an entire line or in an entire passage. So in these examples, you can see there's an example where you have decreased tracking, where all of the letters are equally kind of tight and close together. Then if you see on the bottom, there's another example of increased tracking, where you can see it's a little bit more spacing, a little bit more gappy in between the letters. You know, and again, there's not a science or math to it. It depends on the desired effect that you're trying to create as a designer. So there might be some instances where you might want to have a really, really gappy or really, really loose spacing in between characters in a passage. Or there might be a particular circumstance where you might want to have the lettering be really, really tight together. So it's all about the desired effect, the desired vibe that you're trying to create. Here's another example of tracking used on a paragraph. I'm quite sure that most of you have kind of run into this circumstance of where you've created a passage of text and it looks a little bit weird, because if you see on this example on the left, the word wonderful kind of sticks out a little bit. And then also you have that weird like indentation in the middle, right in where the wonderful is sitting at. By making adjustments in the tracking, you can kind of adjust that entire paragraph to make it flow a little bit better. So if you look on the example on the right, by adjusting the tracking, now we've kind of smoothed out that right side of the paragraph and you know, allowed for the words to wrap a little bit better, and it flows much better. So think about tracking as another tool for you know, making your text look a little bit more smoother you know, when you're doing your design work. Okay, so moving right along. So we'll continue to talk about spacing with leading. But with leading is the spacing that happens above and below lines of text. So it's the spacing from baseline to baseline. Okay, so in these examples over here, you can see different examples of leading adjustments that were made. So on the example on the left, you can see that the leading is a little bit tight. The spaces in between lines are a little bit tight. If you notice, if you can see, the ascenders and the descenders kind of overlap. And by adjusting the leading, you can kind of give it a little bit more room, a little bit more breathing room. A general rule is to have your leading to be 2 points greater than the type size, just for easy reading. So if you look over to the example on the left, right in the middle to the left of that, you'll see leading that was created that might be a little bit too loose, a little bit too gappy. So maybe as a designer, that might be the effect that you're going for. You may want that extra spacing in between, but that's just another example. And then if you look over to the right, you can see an example where as far as readability, you can see that the example on the right is a little bit better as far as the leading is concerned. It's a nice space. It feels much better. It's a little bit more of a rhythm to it in the example on the right when you did that leading adjustment. Okay, so we'll talk about type alignment. You have what's called flush left, which is everything is aligned in a straight line on the left side of the text. Also, you might also hear the term align left or left align, depending on who you're speaking with, where you're at, or what particular type of software you're using. But it's all the same. So you have a straight line, straight aligned on the left side, and on the right side you have like what's called ragged, ragged on the right side. So flush right is the exact opposite of that. You have everything is aligned on the right, and on the left side everything is ragged. And then you have what's called justified, where you have alignments on both the left and the right side. Sometimes you run into problems when you decide to apply justified to a passage, where you might find a little bit of extra spacing in between your words. That's something that's a little problem area. What you can possibly do, since you just learned about tracking, you can possibly use tracking to make little slight adjustments when you're using justification to kind of decrease that spacing in between words. And then lastly, you have centered, which is basically everything is above and below, centered on top of each other, stacked. And it's ragged left and ragged right, depending on how your lines of text are centered above and below each other. Okay, so we'll talk about hierarchy. Hierarchy lets the reader know where to look first. Hierarchy is really important in design. As a designer, you should be the one leading the reader and letting them, and kind of like deciding or letting the reader know what's most important to look at or what to look at first. The general rule is, things that are at the top, things that are bold, things that are bigger are usually have higher hierarchy. So those are the things that people generally look at first. So if you look at this flyer, Typography Workshop is at the top and it's big and bold. So that's generally the first thing that a reader is going to look at. And then as you kind of look through the text, you see like different variations in type sizes and boldness, just to kind of like guide the reader as to what's the most important information, what to look at next, what to look at third. If you could imagine, if I was to use this same flyer and make everything in the same bold, the reader wouldn't know which information is the most important, or wouldn't be able to quickly pick out the important information. So using hierarchy and using variation in your type sizes and weights allow for the most important information to stand out, and allows the reader to kind of quickly pick out useful info. Contrast. So when you think about contrast, we can talk about contrast as far as typography is concerned. We could talk about contrast as far as type sizes or weights, but I'm going to focus in a little bit on color. Now, I'm not going to go too much into color because that'll be like a whole other workshop that you can do on color. But when you think about contrast and color with typography, generally black and whites, or black on white or white on black, creates the greater contrast. Higher contrasts, when you think about hierarchy, stand out more. So people are going to look at things of higher contrast or elements of higher contrast first, and kind of put more importance on that. So if you look at these examples, on the left and the right, you see the white text on the black background and the black text on the white background. That stands out a lot more. You look at that first. In the middle, you see the same text, same size, same weight, everything, but when you use, in the grayscale, we're using a light gray background with a much more darker gray. It doesn't quite stand out as much, and it kind of like sits in the background. So think about that when you're doing your design work, how to use contrast to create hierarchies and how to create levels of importance in your work. That could be a nice little trick to you kind of put into your toolbox as far as like creating hierarchies in your overall layouts and designs. And so we'll look at a few examples of just like posters and flyers of just things that encompass pretty much what we've just kind of covered, like display type, text type, hierarchies, contrast. If you look at these examples starting on the left, you have this poster which says ignored every day. If you notice, they kind of have, the black background, they have ignored every day. That really light color text on that black background, which creates a contrast. That's where your eye goes first. And then when you look at the text underneath, that's important also, but it's not quite as big. So you would look at the ignored every day, and then the reader would come down and read, when that particular event is happening. So the details are a little bit smaller. To the right of that, you can see this is another event, Shadows in Paradise, 080116. they use a display type for that. They wanted to really grab the reader's attention and look at that first. So that's a headline, big headline. They want extra emphasis on that. But if you want to know what Shadows in Paradise is about, you would have to kind of look in. If you see like the smaller blocks of text that was done in text type, you can read that just to kind of see like the other small details about what that particular event is about. Moving over to the right, if you see like this New York City Ballet poster, the first thing that really stands out is the photograph, of course. But if you just want to focus just on the typography, the first thing that jumps out at you with the typography is ballet. And like I mentioned before, with contrast, you have that dark type, the black, against the white background. So that's what stands out first. And then above it, you see New York City, which is in different grades or levels of gray. And that comes at you kind of afterwards. So it's important, but it's not quite as important as what the designer was trying to show you, that there's a ballet going on. It's the New York City Ballet. And then underneath that, you'll see, the other little details, also in bold, big, but, it's the dates, the times, the address, how to get tickets. That stuff is below. Also, just to kind of backtrack, if you notice, we were talking about leading before, and we were talking about rules. If you notice, the New York City Ballet, the way it's stacked, the leading is very tight. They're literally like on top of each other and overlapping. That was totally intentional by the designer. I know we talked about rules, but sometimes you can throw the rules out of the window and kind of like, there's a certain vibe or a certain design that you're trying to go for. You can do that. So here they made the leading, very tight right on top of each other, but that's totally intentional. The saying is, once you know the rules, you learn the rules and you understand the rules, you can kind of throw the rules out the window and do what you want to do, just to kind of get your message across. And then to the right of that, you have a poster. This is Dieter Rams' quote, "Good design is as little design as possible." So the designer they put that in big and bold at the very top, going back to hierarchy again. The designer wanted you to see that first. And then there's another quote that's underneath that's also important, but it's a little bit longer. So they made that a little bit smaller, so for you to kind of like look at. So that's, typography. This is just like a basic, just to give you a basic understanding, a basic tip of the iceberg of typography. My general advice, as far as just learning about typography or just design in general, is that the design is all around you. So when you're like out in the street, you're looking at television, or you're just like out and about, just look at what the things or the designs that resonate most with you, and see what it is about that makes it good design, and see what it is, like what little tips and tricks that the designer did to make it really, really stand out and really, really good. But on the same note, also look at designs that you would look at as possibly bad designs, and think about and look at and have a critical eye on what is it that makes it bad, and also think about what would you do as a designer to improve that particular design. And then when you go back to your work, you have that same critical eye when you look at your own work and look and see how you can make adjustments and improvements on your work, just to kind of make it a little bit tighter. So that's my take.
Nice.
Thanks for listening and tuning in.
Yeah, thanks, Isa. No, that's great advice. And I know we're kind of focusing and looking at typography from more of a print background, which starts to make a lot of sense. That's where the real kind of not the origination of typography, but kind of its most prevalent use has been historically through print design. But the beauty of understanding typography and that context is that it completely translates over to everything else that we're doing here at Top Coders. So it translates over to UI design, and then the way that you're designing typography in your designs ultimately translates to how a developer is actually coding that typography. So if you understand the basics of the things that, Isa was talking about, all of those same rules, the same mindset, the same understanding, all of that applies one-to-one to UI design as well. So this is kind of looking at it from, the base level of typography. And the easiest way to explain a lot of that is through print design. But the rules definitely apply to everything we're doing, here at Topcoder as well. So yes, thank you, Isa. This was awesome. All right. So just a couple of design updates that we wanted to cover and kind of announce on Workshop Wednesday. So we are currently looking at and updating our design policies. So these are the policies that are attached to every design challenge. So we currently have, stock artwork and font policies, which if you've competed on any design challenge, you should be fairly familiar with those policies. So what we're doing is starting to look at those, update things to modernize those policies, but also make things a bit easier for you as designers. So with that, we're splitting icons out into its own separate policy. And this is to account for a little bit of confusion that we've seen of clients that don't necessarily want to allow stock artwork, but there's still a need for the UI design to include icons. So we want to be able to have a little bit more flexibility to either allow you to use stock artwork and icons or just icons. And this is largely just dependent on the client's usage and kind of what makes sense for the actual project. So with stock artwork, we're more or less keeping things the same. We're modernizing a little bit of the language. We're updating the list of approved stock artwork. So some of this you may have already seen, but we're adding in unsplash.com and pexels.com, which should give us a little bit more freedom in kind of what we're designing. With fonts, so the font policy is largely staying the same as well. We're more or less just updating the list of approved fonts. And largely this is to align with just generally what we're seeing in kind of the industry of UI design. So there's much more of a push toward, Typekit, much more of a push toward Google fonts. And so we're just updating the policies to kind of align with, what we're kind of seeing in the larger design industry. And then icons. So icons it's kind of a new policy, but it's still pulling from the existing, kind of stock artwork language. So with the icon policy, we're really kind of splitting this out into its own policies. So again, we can more or less, allow this on challenges where stock artwork may not be allowed. The big push for icons is to start to use 100% vector and or SVG icons in your designs. So we want to get away from using, low-res PNGs or JPEGs or, things like that we have historically kind of used just because of the approved list of icons. But this has notoriously kind of ran into problems once we get to UI prototype. So kind of the best practices, for development now is for icons is to use, SVG for those. There's, much greater control on the development side. They can reuse and resize a single icon throughout the design. So it's a little bit less weight on the actual code to actually develop a lot of those. So again, kind of modernizing, you know, how we're approaching icons in the designs that we do. So these should all be live fairly soon. We're just working through the last few updates, and then we'll get these all uploaded into Direct. So shouldn't really change a lot of how we do challenges. Hopefully it should make things a lot easier and a lot clearer on kind of what we're expecting. So look for those updates soon. And then the next big news, so if you are on the design newsletter or have heard any additional updates from Jesse, just want to reiterate that we are giving away 2 trips to TCO Indonesia. So these are winning trips by collecting TCO points. So these points are being collected throughout the month of May, with 2 designers winning a trip to TCO Indonesia, which is taking place on August 11th through 12th. So the first designer, the first trip, is going to the member with the most TCO points overall. And so those are the overall points throughout the month of May. The second trip winner is going to the newbie designer with the most TCO points. So a newbie designer is, you know, someone that's competing for the first time, or, you know, is a relatively new member. So we're calculating their points kind of separately throughout the month of May. So a great opportunity to, you know, if you're new to Topcoder, to compete, to win, you know, valuable TCO points, and ultimately, you know, have a chance to win a trip to TCO Indonesia. So the TCO Indonesia event is a, you know, a regional event. Adam and myself will be on site for 2 days, and we'll be running design workshops, design presentations. We'll be giving away prizes, and it's a ton of fun. So if you know, are in the area, you can definitely come out to TCO Indonesia or compete as much as possible, win TCO points, and hopefully win a trip out and come see us. So yeah, so there's additional info on the newsletter. There's additional info on the TCO site as well. All right, design challenges. So we've launched a new design challenge. I believe it went live yesterday. So this is all about typography. So we want you to take all of the great knowledge that Isa has shared with you all and design some amazing typography posters. So these, the challenge is relatively open. So we haven't put a ton of requirements or guidelines on what you can actually design. So we really want you to be able to, you know, kind of explore concepts, explore ideas, you know, break the rules, and really kind of present some really visually interesting typography posters. Really the only restriction are kind of on the size of the poster that you design. And it should be relatively TCO or Topcoder specific. But other than that, it's pretty vague. So we're giving away 3 cash prizes, and 4th and 5th place are getting a Topcoder t-shirt. And then as well, we're also giving a $50 bonus to any new member that places 1st through 3rd. So again, a great opportunity for new members to jump in. All of these fun challenges also have TCO points. So a great way to jump in, have fun on a challenge, and try to win some TCO points as well. We also have the 2 challenges that we launched last week. So we have our Budsy challenge, which is pretty interesting. If you haven't checked that out, definitely look at that. And then kind of a new idea of a Top Coder logo motion graphics challenge. So again, kind of a new idea here at Top Coder, trying to kind of push the bounds of what design means, and give you a little bit of a greater opportunity to kind of explore some new ideas, some new software, some new ways to kind of think about how you design. So that should be a pretty fun challenge as well. Yeah, so fun challenge. These are the kind of the 3 fun challenges that are out now. I know we have a few others that are planned that should launch relatively soon. So definitely keep your eyes on the challenge listing. And then our customer challenges. So we have a Top Coder challenge. So this is to design some additional profile pages for the Top Coder platform. So jump in and help us actually design Top Coder, which is pretty exciting. So there's a good amount of details and kind of requirements and inputs for what we're looking for, but definitely a great opportunity to share some ideas and kind of shape, what Top Coder actually is. So definitely a fun challenge to jump into. And then we have a concept challenge that is pretty interesting. So if you were on last week, and we kind of talked about production versus concept challenges, this is much more concept focused. So we're looking for new ideas, new ways to kind of approach the problem. So definitely a good opportunity to jump in and try some new ideas, new concepts for that challenge. And then we have a mobile app concept design challenge as well. So this is a pretty interesting challenge as far as subject matter. So definitely take a look at that spec and feel free to jump in. So this is kind of our only mobile app design that's running right now. So if you like to focus on mobile designs, this is definitely the challenge for you. So we have checkpoints coming in on that tomorrow. So still plenty of time to jump in, but definitely get in there quickly. And then lastly, we have our Top Coder community Slack. So most of you are in there, but if not, make sure you email Adam at adrock@topcoder.com. We'll be sure to get you into the Slack channel. It's a great place to kind of meet the other members that are in Top Coder, ask questions. All of the design team is in there as well, so you can definitely ask us questions. But it's a great kind of forum outside of regular Top Coder challenges. So that is it, I believe, for Workshop Wednesday today. So a ton of great information on typography. So definitely make sure you're kind of listening and kind of absorbing a lot of what Isa talked about. We'll be sure to share this deck out on Slack. So if you're not in that community, that's an even better reason to join. But we'll be sure to share this out. A ton of great information, and definitely extremely important to understand as we're working on UI as well. So I think that's it for us this week. We'll be back next Wednesday with another Workshop Wednesday, and we'll see you all then. All right, bye.